In this video we're going to go ahead and finish our cornhole boards. Since my last video I sanded and charred the top to give it a distressed look for the American flag that I'm going to be staining on. I've gone ahead and stained the sides. Those are going to be a different color to offset the flag look. And where we're at right now is I've covered the boards with paper. That way I could lay out my measurements and my flag just to check to make sure everything lined up and adjust the measurements I needed without having to mark on my boards. So we're going to go ahead and transfer that over with painter's tape. Both boards are charred and burned up a little bit. The purpose of this was to not be uniform and not look the same, so it's just a random, some areas burned deeper, some didn't. But that's the whole purpose of it, is just to kind of a random, natural occurring theme and look. As you can see, I used the paper here as a template to lay out and check and tweak the measurements as needed, and just to get a rough idea of how everything would look and lay out. I used a scrap sheet of plywood here as a straight edge to do the lines. I only did 7 up to the union of the flag because that's the tightest measurements, because that union has to line up and end on the 7th stripe. And I transferred my measurements over to a scrap sheet of paper here. So I'm going to uncover the top of the board and make my layouts with painter's tape. So I have all my white stripes taped out and the union taped out as well. So I'll go ahead and stain my red stripes, and while that's drying I'll tape and stain the red stripes of the other board, and then as that's drying I'll come back and tape off and do the white stripe. So I got my red stripes done. I did 2 coats on this. The first coat I put on and I pretty much wiped all the excess away. The second coat I really didn't do that. I just used my rag to wipe it in. I like the look of that better. I liked how it turned out. The color's not perfect. It's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to look old and faded. And I intentionally left that spot blank. I'm gonna add a different color there because my tape was a little bit wider than my lines. Rather than measuring the excess and trying to trim the tape and keep it straight, I went ahead and worked every other white line, taping off the red lines, and then I would switch boards and do that, and then I would come back to the first board and take the tape off and tape the red lines for the ones that weren't done. And I did that alternating back and forth. While one was drying, I was working on the other one, and it really worked out well. It didn't take that much extra time. It was probably quicker than trying to measure down and trim the tape. And because the white was so light, I used a paintbrush on it, and at first I started out using a rag and wiping the excess off, and it took me probably 5 coats to get what I can with 2 with the paintbrush. So I was kind of skeptical, but I was really happy with the way that turned out. So I have my stripes and union done. Now all I have to do is get a template set to paint the star. So I used a glue bottle to lay out the round shape for the leg, and I set a mark at 1 inch in and 1 inch up, 1 inch being half of this board, to put my bolt in. I used a scrap piece of 1x3 to gap the distance between the board and the leg. I have it clamped up in place, and I'm going to drill from the back side. So I've set up a scrap sheet to prevent blowout. So I got my legs bolted in place, and now I'm setting my board 12 inches off the ground to make my mark for my legs. And as you can see, I used the most scientific and safest, accurate way to get the board. So I have my legs cut, drilled, and sanded. I'll be honest, for me this was the hardest part of the build, was just finding the angle for these legs to get that board at 12 inches. It was a lot of trial and error, just measure cut until I got the exact angle. So now I'm going to stain these to match the size of the board and get it bolted on. So I've gotten all the legs stained and put on, and I've done a check of the height, and they both look good. They both measure 12 inches up from the back. Art isn't my strong suit, so I ordered a star template from Amazon. It's supposed to be here today. So as soon as that gets in, I can go ahead and stain the stars on, put on some polyurethane, and call my customer to come pick them up. If you like this video or the other videos I put out, go ahead and give me a like and hit that subscribe button. I'm gonna try to put something out every week. I'm just getting this process started. I'm new to YouTube. I don't have any sponsors that I do or that I work with, so I'm just trying to get this up and going, and I would really appreciate a like or a subscribe, and leave me a comment.